Hello, and welcome to episode number 74 of the LSR Podcast. My name is Matt Brown, joined each and every week by the brightest minds in all of the gaming industry. With me, Adam Candee, Dustin Gouker. You can find them on Twitter, and you should. Adam Candee, that is 2 E's, no Y. Dustin Gouker. If you want to follow me, which you should not, I have no idea why you would, at Matt Brown M2. We are on all the places you listen to podcasts, so please go in, subscribe, rate, and review. Apple, Stitcher, Google, Spotify, all those different places. We do appreciate that. So we're going to take a look at some numbers as we do each time that these come out. And this is some pretty interesting numbers at that. No doubt about it. We'll talk about some pretty interesting developments in the televised golf world when it comes to betting as well. We've talked about this several different times on the podcast, how we think that this maybe is a sport that has the most to gain through legalization in the country. But guys, let's go ahead and kick things off here. And Dustin, Barstool, and it seems like every single week we have something to say about Barstool. That being said, this one is something that is just a legitimate story here. It's not like we're picking on Barstool. It's just something that needs to be said.
I mean, maybe Barstool should sponsor us at this point. We do so much content and stuff about them, but no, not actually. That's not going to happen. But yeah, the latest one came out of another podcast that the founder of Barstool Sports, Dave Portnoy, did, saying he spent the first 15 minutes of it talking about how he basically pulls all the strings at Barstool Sportsbook. We've had some questions about this because he's posting all the time these big 5-figure, I don't think he's done a 6-figure bet, but he's done lots of bets claiming to have done lots of bets at Barstool Sportsbook. We then get this podcast where he's saying, yeah, everybody at this company basically reports to me. That's not a direct quote. I can get the direct quote if you want. But everybody but the CEO of Penn National Gaming, which bought a minority stake in Barstool to use it as a sports betting platform, they report to me. They have to. If I pick up the phone and I call them, they better answer to me right away, and they have to do what I say. Now there's some, that's problematic. Obviously, if you are running the sportsbook or quote unquote a key employee, this is, again, they're only operational in Pennsylvania. They are. But in Pennsylvania and in every regulated state, you are not allowed to bet on your app if you're a quote-unquote key employee or whatever the equivalent language is in that state. It's a problem, right? You can't be running the sportsbook, have the keys to the sportsbook, and then also be betting at it. So it's not not clear. Is he actually betting on the app? He's telling us he does. 2, does he actually have this level of control? Again, he's telling us directly in a podcast that is apparently pretty uncensored, saying, yes, I have this control over Barstool Sportsbook. So that's where we come in and we're like, wait a second, there's nobody else doing this. This seems to be a problem to an outside observer like us.
So Adam, I know the Jersey rule is for a key employee, not even on your own stuff. You cannot bet in that state at other places, like at all. Like, it is one of those things where if you are a key employee in that market, you can't bet anywhere. And so I imagine it's probably the same. I can't speak for Pennsylvania, but probably pretty close, at least anyway. So now this really does kind of beg the question, is he the boss or is he the spokesman? Because there are two very, very different things right there. We know a spokesperson can do all of these other things, but if you're the boss, it's different rules for you.
And we've been asking this question, Matt, from long before the podcast. I mean, I first put this question to Pennsylvania regulators probably 3 weeks ago, and I thought that I was coming at it from the angle of he's a principal in Barstool Sportsbook. Of course, that's not accurate, but then we came back at it with the key employee piece, and that seems fairly hard to miss the distinction there, right? Because the man is the face of the entire thing. And I know that's for marketing purposes, but if you say they answer when I call, and if you say they answer to Jay, who's Jay Snowden, the CEO of Penn National Gaming, and they answer to me, and you're talking about the fact that you yourself are dictating promos to the sportsbook.
Yeah.
What am I missing? What am I missing in terms of your level of control into the input of the book? And all of his toadies are out there on social media tagging him when we put a story out there saying, what do you think about this? I don't care what he thinks about this. I care what Pennsylvania regulators think about this.
Yeah, I mean, so let's look at it even further. I mean, even if it's not from regulators, right? I mean, this is also typically a company policy for a lot of different companies. I know people who are not even key employees who are way further down the line that if you work for said company, you are not allowed to gamble at said company. And that even includes like playing in the poker room, which as we know is peer to peer and isn't even like kind of playing against the house. You know, I mean, this is literally people just taking everyone else's money as opposed to playing against the house. And they still don't even allow that. And so this even kind of like takes this a step further where even if the regulators, if this hasn't popped up on the regulators kind of radar yet, Dustin, even within a company, right? Like, shouldn't there be a policy in place where it's like, we probably shouldn't be doing this just as a company?
Yeah, and I mean, you and I know this was daily fantasy sports too, right? Yeah. This is what back in 2015. This is what started a mess in daily fantasy sports. So I don't know. I don't think we're being that alarmist by bringing this issue up. And yeah, there's it's bad optics, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like some people are like, oh, whatever, you can bet whatever. It's just good interaction. I don't know. I don't buy that. And again, they made this a rule for a reason. It's not just put it willy-nilly out there for no reason. So yeah, I agree. That's like, this is here's the part we don't know. Is he embellishing all of this? Is he not actually betting all of these things? Is he not actually have this level of control? Is just saying it? I don't know. I don't think he's just making it up either. So I think if he's just throwing this stuff out there in what we look at as a potential violation of regulations in Pennsylvania, that's a problem. And maybe Pennsylvania will shrug its shoulders, but will everybody else if this stuff is happening? I don't know. I don't think so.
So Adam, if people just want examples for something like this, I mean, if you're kind of sitting out there and you're kind of going, I don't really get it. What's the big deal here? Well, this is in theory, right? We're not saying at all, disclaimer, I'm not saying at all that this happens. I'm just giving an example here. People are trying to connect the dots on, yes, like how this might go. Well, say he wants to bet a game and he is a key employee and has intimate knowledge of when a line is going to move a half a point one way or the other or something. And he would rather bet a game at 3 as opposed to 3.5. But he knows if he holds out, this game is going to go to 3 because someone, he's intimately into when they're going to move the lines or whatever, or something like that, or when it's going to move off of a 3 or these different stuff. So, I mean, again, hypothetically, that's why this is kind of so important, because you could game the system as it is. If you know when a line is going to move, you can always get the better of it, and you're going to get an unfair advantage over the rest of everybody else. And so there's reasons why these things exist.
I agree with you, Matt, and I don't even know if it has to be that nefarious. I think it can be more about the perception than it is about the reality. You guys just talked about, is he embellishing or is he not? In the end, I don't know that it matters. I think the point is that if you're drawing the attention to Barstool Sportsbook and to Penn National for the question of, are you betting at your own book in such a way that is against the rules of either the book or of regulators or of just common sense policy, then you're bringing attention that the industry at large doesn't need. And I'm just frankly continually shocked at the way Penn National has dealt with this. I mean, Penn National seems to have gone all the way in on Portnoy and realizes that, you have to accept it for what it is, and don't seem to be exercising the level of control that a company that has 2 seats on a 7-person board, as Penn does on Barstool's board, could exercise that level of control. It's shocking to me. And, we are hearing from people in other markets, overseas, back channel kind of stuff, who are saying to us, what in the world is going on over there? Like, this is something that is beyond.
Yeah, I get this stuff all the time. Like Adam says, like, people just behind the scenes, like, what? And this is not just this issue. Again, what we're talking about on the podcast about Barstool, they're like flummoxed, like that. They're using kids, that this is their responsible gambling message, that they're like, all this stuff is like. Do you know how quickly this stuff would get shut down in the UK? Mm-hmm. That's the wild part. And back again to the micro before we get to this. Like Penn's statement about this was, it's just about promotional opportunities. Does that really make it any better if he just has control over promotion abilities? Like, I want to bet on this. Here, do this promo so I can bet on it. Like, that's even that is like that's weird and should not be happening in the market, right? Again, we're just using his own words that he's betting. And that he's got this level of control. If those things aren't true, then come out and say that, or I think you're in trouble. And you should be in trouble.
Exactly, that's what we're saying. Like we don't really know. All we can go on is what's being said, right? I mean, this could all be just smoke and mirrors and all for show and all for the camera and all for the social media. that's fine, I suppose, but that's not being said. That's not being put out in statements. So that's kind of why we're questioning as to what really is going on here. But Adam, I mean, look, they're in Pennsylvania. We know that they are going to be expanding their operations, and it looks like it's not going to be very long until they do.
No, Michigan appears to be next. That's the word from the company. Penn National looks like it's saying Michigan next, and then they want to go live everywhere that mobile betting is legal in 2021. So it won't be just Pennsylvania regulators looking at this, right? So what's going to happen is, if in 2021 they're in a dozen states, we're not just talking about the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. We're talking about any state-level regulator who wants to get involved in this could have a question and come down on either Barstool or Penn National. Now, let's be clear also about one other thing. The Barstool folks want to say it's because it's Barstool, they hate us because they ain't us. This would be a question for DraftKings, for FanDuel, for PointsBet, for William Hill, for any other operator who chose to do this. The thing of it is, they're not doing it. Yeah. And we've had a legal sports betting market in the U.S. for 2.5 years where we haven't had any question that any comes anywhere near this. So it just happens to be Barstool who's doing it. So separate that out even from the responsible gaming piece that we've talked about before where we say, what are you doing? That's irresponsible. The idea of a key employee / principal dictating bets at his own sportsbook, or in a scenario that you mentioned, potentially knowing what a line is ahead of time, it's not just going to bring down Barstool if that's the case. It's not just going to bring down Penn National. It is going to bring a mountain of regulation onto this industry throughout the United States, and it's going to be one bad actor doing stupid stuff.
And there's... the response to this will be like, oh, yeah, right. Like, I know when a line's going to move. Well, you either control everything or you don't, right? I mean, are you the boss or you're not? You know what I'm saying? It's going to be picking and choosing as to like, no, I run all that. I don't run that. I know the response to all this stuff. And we're not saying that that's what happened. I'm just saying in a hypothetical situation, that's why this matters, because that could, in theory, be something that, I mean, Adam, you and I know guys that like tangible guys that move lines, that decide when they're going to move lines. Like they know when a thing's going from 2.5 to 3 or 3 to 3.5 or whatever. Like we know these guys that make those decisions. And so there are those people who do exist. And so if you're saying that you're kind of running the show, would you be privy to that type of information? Who knows? I don't know, but I'm just saying it's like we keep going back to the optics thing. Us who know how things work, you step back and you say, okay, worst case scenario, that is happening. This is horrible for the whole industry. It's not just for Barstool. And I think that's another message that I like to kind of want to get across. There's not like we're picking on a single entity here or a single company. We're kind of like just looking out for things in general, right? I mean, like let's still new guys. Like let's not continue to like walk up right to that line every single time and see just how far we can push the line like every single time. I mean, Dustin, you mentioned we're not that far removed from the stuff that went on the DFS, and that wasn't even like stuff happening within the own company. It was playing on the competitors, site that like started all the things in the DFS side of things. And so, I mean, this is we've kind of seen this play out already.
Yeah, and I think it's important. In Nevada, the one established market we have, this has not been going on either. Yeah. We know people do bet who are involved, but they go to other sports books to bet. It's not. This is not rocket science. Don't bet at your own sports book. That's pretty easy.
Right. I agree with you. All right. So DraftKings, we mentioned DraftKings a couple of different times here. So let's go ahead and do our weekly DraftKings update. Dustin, are you about to retire off of your DraftKings stock?
Man, I feel like I must have been slacking on DraftKings stock touting because they're all the way down to $45. This is like a new low after in
you know what? I think we didn't talk about it last week on the pod is what it was. I think we didn't talk about the stock.
Obviously. I mean, I have not been putting out $DKNG enough on the Twitter machine. I'm pretty sure. But anyway, we have analysts who are now split. Not everybody's like, go buy DraftKings. We have somebody who, with Credit Suisse, who's saying it has a $76 target and an outperform rating, while Deutsche Bank is pumping the brakes and actually has a $48 target, which is the first time we've seen anybody kind of pumping the brakes on a gaming stock anytime lately. So, I mean, right now, who knows? It was until now it's been to the moon for every gaming stock in the world, including DraftKings. DraftKings, obviously, we slowed down a little bit with its new offering and a discount that was offered on the stock versus that. So we'll see what's going on in the market. Again, we're not stock touts, but people are still pretty high on DraftKings. It's just not quite as bullish as it was in the past. But, right now, gaming stocks continue to go up. And other than DraftKings right now, which who knows if that'll change in the near term.
And Adam, we've talked about this before, but it's worth repeating that, sportsbook run these businesses on such slim margins. But we know that the online casino side of things is certainly incredibly profitable, and they have started to dip their toe into that as well. We know there is an office presence here in Las Vegas that is ever growing, that a lot of the portion of that is focused around online casino as well. And so I think maybe, and I'm just speculating here, we are not stock touts, but we're not stock touts here, but I imagine some of these longer term vision things here are probably looking at the fact that eventually there will be more states with online casino. Eventually, just about every state will probably have online casino. And I say eventually, in the next decade or something like that. And at that point, yeah, I mean, these companies could actually just rocket ship when it comes as far as profits.
And I think that's the case for projecting out I'm going to say staggering multiples that one analyst has put out there. I think the flip side is if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas, right? Like, we still have to have a number of states come not only to having sports betting, but to having online casino. And what we've seen is that it's not a slam dunk that if you get online sports betting in a state that you also get online casino. It is a severely limited market for what it is right now. I mean, basically you have New Jersey and Pennsylvania, you're going to have Michigan, and nobody else is doing it at the moment. So if you're projecting out based on that, then I think you have a long way to go. One of the other things that I thought was interesting in that story was the idea that it's not just about DraftKings being a sports betting provider. It's that they're being valued sort of as a tech company, right? And we've heard this talked about before, that it's a whole lot more about the tech than it is about what they're using the tech on. And so you could start to dream about, if it's a tech company, what other applications could it have long down the line, right? I mean, we talked about DFS, we talked about sports betting, now we're talking about casino. Who knows what could be available down the line if your tech is that good? Well,
Dustin, we were sitting here in a story that's over on LSR, and this kind of news went through earlier this morning, was DraftKings had yet another deal that was just getting solidified. And it was a little confusing because we knew that there was already a deal involved with this company with one of their competitors, but it seems like they're going to be able to coexist in different kind of lanes within the company.
Yeah, this is we've been talking about this, the number of media partners out there for sports betting, and this is the one I think we identified, which is Turner Sports, which also owns Bleacher Report, oversees TBS, TNT. We have this morning DraftKings and FanDuel both announcing separately, but almost in tandem, that FanDuel is an operator that will get all of the rights to NBA content and advertising related to that. Obviously TNT, their pregame show, everything that they do there. That DraftKings gets Major League Baseball, and the PGA Tour also gets, if NCAA ever comes around, Turner actually runs NCAA.com and has dibs on advertising there, according to our story from Brad Allen. So, another one of those media deals that has been sitting out there. There had been a relationship with FanDuel already, but we have just another one, another deal in the sports betting industry. And this should be, again, you're going to get a lot of front of eyeballs. The NBA and FanDuel have been involved together for a long time. The getting on baseball and PGA Tour broadcasts potentially, and in front of those content, it's all things that dovetail with what FanDuel and DraftKings are trying to do in their larger media strategy.
Adam, not really picking a winner in this because things could play out differently, who knows, down the line. But if you're FanDuel and you got in on the NBA product that is going on within Turner's organization, then that has to be where you're feeling pretty happy about your position there. I mean, Dustin talked about it, but I mean, that show with Shaq and Charles and Kenny, and that show one, incredibly, hugely popular. And then when you're having these guys actually talk about it pregame, postgame as to what, Charles Barkley, obviously we know is a big gambler anyway, but he talks about, I wish I could bet that game and whatever, that means something to some people. And that means something to someone who might be like, you know what, I will bet that because Charles said that. I think that's a big, big, big win for FanDuel to get the basketball product.
Seems like a long time ago that Charles Barkley was going to Dr. Afkings for advice, huh? Yeah, we've come all the way around to this being a FanDuel product. No one show is more closely associated with its sport than Inside the NBA is with that product. And beyond that, you have two hugely successful advertising personalities in Charles Barkley and, of course, Shaquille O'Neal. I mean, Shaq's name is on everything seemingly these days. So getting that property alone is huge for FanDuel. And I think the NBA, again, you and I know this. We've talked about it in other ventures that we've been involved in. The NBA, in terms of in-play, is going to be a very popular product once it's grown out and matured.
Seems like can Kenny Smith still hawk BetMGM because of this deal? I'm just realizing
this is what I'm saying, right? These are the things I'm talking about.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm going to assume no, but who knows? I imagine.
I mean, they've moved on to Jamie Foxx, but bigger than Kenny Smith. But.
Yeah, Jamie Foxx standing on the water in the Bellagio fountains and having the fountains blow up behind him and saying, "Go bet on BetMGM." I was like, yeah, I mean that works. That's pretty powerful. Can't imagine how much that cost them. I bet that was a pretty penny. Adam, we love to talk numbers, so let's go ahead and we really like to talk numbers when they are fairly staggering numbers. Let's talk those New Jersey numbers real quick.
It kind of feels like every month the New Jersey Division of Gaming Enforcement just sort of goes in and grabs a Sharpie and draws a number up on the board and says, what do you think? Would this be good? Like, this looks really good. And this month they wrote $748 million on the board. Joking, of course, that New Jersey market in September sets not only a state record, but another national record, breaking its own national record from last month. And think about what was on the September sports calendar. The NFL for 3 weeks. You also had college football. You also had the NBA and NHL playoffs plus Major League Baseball. You pretty much had everything you could want in terms of a betting market to be on the board. So I would say this is probably the peak. I don't think October is going to have the chance to go higher than this just because you're going to pull some sports off the board. But who knows? Yeah. I mean, football betting is only getting bigger, so you know that it's possible. 90% of those wagers were placed online. That is close to the peak of what we've seen from New Jersey. Of course, we know that market had been operating for most of 2019 around 8 out of every 10. Now we're up to 9 out of every 10. Not surprising during the pandemic and less people going to Atlantic City. So it's truly remarkable that we had set last year in March a national record in Nevada with over 600 million wagered in March Madness in that month. And now we're $150 million past it in New Jersey. And I think it's fair to say also the market is not completely at maturity, right? I mean, yes, you still have the New York City influence in New Jersey, and that can't be taken out without affecting the numbers. But at the same time, we're still talking about only 2.5 years.
And this was something we talked about this months ago, that this was kind of forecasted by some of these people. They were saying, listen, if the demand and if everything keeps up, September is going to be an absolute monster month. And that is what we saw. And another one of these fairly new markets in Indiana, Dustin, is really making some noise as well.
Yeah, we saw just getting the first. That's one of the first states we get with the September numbers. 207 million in handle, better than their best, which is actually in February. This market's only a year old, so not even anywhere near maturity there either. So this is, we are seeing new floors for what a big month will be. And yeah, Adam's right. We're gonna September's kind of the perfect storm. We had a lot of sports still going on. We had the start of football. I mean, everything's still going to be big, but I guess I don't see October and the following months being that big. So we might have hit the high water mark. I don't know. I'm just thinking about this. We talked this number. I mean, we keep looking at New York and whether they're going to legalize. Man, I start seeing $1 billion almost in handle. That's what I mean. When you look at it next year, I mean, we're going to be approaching $1 billion in monthly handle for September, I think, in New Jersey next year, right? Like, if I'm looking at these numbers at just New York, I'm like, that starts like you start seeing $3 billion a month out. Even though that's not revenue, it's not revenue for the state, but I think that starts catching people's attention a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, this is just two states right here in New Jersey and Indiana, and we're basically at $1 billion between those two states. We still will have Nevada numbers come out, which everybody we talk to thinks that September was going to be massive for them, and so I mean, we still have a bunch of numbers to come out here, and I can't wait until we get those as well. But Adam, one of the numbers didn't really fall in line with everybody else. That'd be the old District of Columbia there.
Yeah, DC is trailing by a long shot. I'll get to that in just a second. I want to add one point to what we talked about with Indiana. Keep in mind that with in-person registration suspended in Illinois, we expected that Illinois bettors who were betting in Indiana would come back over to Illinois. Indiana still set a record in September, so there's a reasonable question to be asked here. With Chicago market having gone to Indiana for the better part of a year to place its wagers, whether or not they might be able to hold some of their customers. It should be really interesting to see because you have similar books operating in both states. And so what are they going to do? Do they want to pull those Illinois bettors back into Illinois and cannibalize the Indiana market? It's going to be a really interesting thing to see play out between Illinois and Indiana with in-person registration still suspended. Now, in Washington, D.C., you mentioned the mobile sports betting, and my goodness, Matthew, $3.3 million wagered on the Gambit DC app.
Yeah.
There was one wager this month placed that was almost that much in another market. $12 million wagered at William Hill at their Capital One Arena temporary sportsbook. So 4 times the amount just on retail. And it's gotten to the point where people are willing to wait in line. There was one tweet that we dropped into Matt Waters' story about someone complaining to Ted Leonsis saying, hey, can we do something about the hour-long lines that we're waiting in to place bets? That's how much people hate the Intralot product that is being offered on an app. That no. I don't want to bet from home on my app. No, no. You want me to take minus 150 sides? No. I'm going to go down to William Hill and place my bet in person, even if I have to wait for an hour.
It's William Hill doesn't even have to do the marketing. Like Gambit is doing the marketing for them. It's literally like, hey, this is what you pay for this bet, and this is what you pay for this bet. You make the decision. Like you don't even have to really do much more than that. Like, yeah, here's the price. Here's our price. Do what you want to do. I mean, that seems like it's crazy. I'm glad. Look, I saw this morning some renderings came out about what they're actually trying to. The final product of that William Hill book will look like. It looks really, really nice. And, for those people there, I'm glad they at least have another option, even though it's not completely ideal for them in that market. Dustin, so let's talk about Scorekeepers, which is a pretty interesting thing for the NBA. Of course, the NBA finals did conclude. Lakers win, favorites to do all that. The bubble success, I don't think anyone out there would say the bubble was not a huge success with everything the way it went down. But just interesting about a story that does I think it's worth looking into, at least anyway, or bringing up, for the fact that Scorekeepers do have a pretty big influence on things.
Yeah, this is one of the more fascinating things I think we've seen at LSR recently. It's about a study published in the Journal of Prediction Markets about official scorekeepers in the NBA and how they're some of them are skewing statistics. Now, we don't really not any proof that this is related to betting markets, but this is a problem, right? We're looking at statistics. The statistics are supposed to be a thing, right? They're concrete. They're things, but there is a lot of wiggle room, especially in the NBA, on what's a statistic. The biggest one is rebounds. I think is what we saw is that there are teams and their scorekeepers who are not grading rebounds the same way everywhere. So this is, if you're going to have an inflection point on gambling, like, you don't need to get to the players. You don't necessarily need to get to referees even. You can get to a scorekeeper potentially. Like, that's a potential problem. Again, we're not saying this is happening, but already we already have bias or problems in how rebounds and some other statistics are calculated and scored. Like, and it's also problematic in that we have the leagues coming back to us and saying, "Oh, official data, that can only use official data." If the official data is suspicious, as we see there, there's a problem. There's so many great quotes in this. The inconsistency, here's one of them. The inconsistencies and biases also have monetary implications for fans who participate in fantasy leagues, which rely on daily box score statistics. And as we know, from following daily fantasy, people have had problems with how this stuff is scored for a long time, and whether something's actually counted as an assist or a rebound. It should be a pretty black and white, but there's some gray in there that let's some bias or some subjectiveness get in there. So really interesting topic, and certainly one that bears watching as the U.S. sports betting industry grows.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I guess I never really thought about it, Adam. I mean, you see the parallel now, though. The reason that a lot of Olympic sports aren't able to be bet on is because there's not a definitive yes, no, this did happen, this didn't happen. A lot of judging goes into Olympic sports. There's a lot of subjectiveness that goes into Olympic sports. It's not, hey, a basket went through the hoop, it counts for 2 points. It's, I think that person didn't land that quite as good, so they get a 9.4 as opposed to a 9.5. And so we don't get to bet on that as much, but there is subjectivity actually when it comes to scorekeepers and things like that. I mean, I think we've just become accustomed to the fact that umpires are just going to be part of baseball, and there is a lot of subjectivity in that. But scorekeepers, when it comes to statistics and specifically prop bets that you can make along the way, there is at least a little bit of something, I think, to look into. I mean, you can't get down a ton of money on most of these props as it is anyway, so I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze as trying to, bribe a scorekeeper or something like that. But, it's worth a topic to talk about anyway, I think.
I don't even know if you have to go as far as bribing the scorekeeper. I think if you look at our story, you see that you have about 8 teams that are pointed out as being more favorable to the home team in terms of how they grade certain stats. If you know that, then you know that if you want to go, let's say, play on the Dallas Mavericks on rebound props, that you might lean toward the over, right? You might lean toward over on any of these teams where they tend to be a little more lenient in terms of whether they give assists, right? Assist is a very subjective stat where you have to determine whether or not someone's pass led to the score, right? Like, I don't know, did he take 3 dribbles before it, right? If you know that these scorekeepers tend to be more lenient, then that's significant information. So it's a bigger question for us in terms of the betting industry about the official data, as Dustin just talked about, and that when you have single source data, that you will leave yourself vulnerable to these sorts of irregularities, and that requiring the use of official data as opposed to allowing sportsbooks to make their own choice of whether to get it from the leagues or whether to get it from another provider, that's the problem. The problem is requiring a feed that could potentially, and we're not saying it is, we're just saying could potentially be subject to some level of irregularity. Or you need to then say to the league, okay, we've spotted this irregularity and you need to do something about what's going on with your scorekeepers.
Right. And this is kind of like, this goes back to the Barstool thing and this as well. We're not saying anything is happening. We are not saying that anything nefarious is going on. It is just worth bringing these things up because it's better to be out in front of things as opposed to be always playing catch up and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely worth bringing up with all of these things that we talk about here on the podcast for sure. Adam, let's close things out here. Something happening right down the road from us, unfortunately, due to COVID and social distancing and all the stuff like that. We cannot go take this in person, which is quite the bummer. Down the street at Shadow Creek, one of the most exclusive golf courses in the country. A big golf tournament is going on, the CJ Cup, with 19 of the top 25 players in the world are teeing it up as we speak right now on Thursday over there. But one of the big announcements that came out a couple of days before this was going to go off was the fact that through Shadow Creek being owned by MGM, BetMGM already having a partnership with the PGA Tour, it seemed like the stars aligned here for this to be kind of a trial run as to how much betting content we are able to really put into a broadcast and us feel comfortable consuming it, making sense for the consumer, and being informative. I think that there is some informational stuff that comes from this as well, and we're going to find out because it's happening over the next 4 days.
Let's start with the operative question here, Matt, because I have not had the opportunity to play Shadow Creek. Have you?
I have ridden Shadow Creek multiple times. So I have done a bunch of programming from out there, but I have never played Shadow Creek. I do at least know the course fairly well. So I when people talk about Shadow Creek, I can at least say like, oh yeah, I know that. Yeah, hole 6 over there. Yeah, I'm pretty good. I've ridden the golf cart around the course about 10 times.
That fair. That is basically the level of Augusta National that I have, where I can say, yeah, I've been there.
Yeah.
I sure still haven't played there. This is going to be really interesting because, as you and I have discussed ad nauseum, I'm sure to some people, golf betting in terms of in-play is a huge opportunity. And I think you can take all sorts of angles when you look at this piece, right? Not only are you going to potentially drive engagement in a different way, a lot of people don't want to place a pre-tournament bet, try to have to pick from 60, 70, 80 golfers and figure out who they want to ride for an entire tournament. You don't want your bet necessarily to be dead on Thursday if a guy has a terrible round. So you can consume golf in a different way. You can consume it hole by hole. You can consume it hour by hour. You can consume it day to day, as in Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you can do it while you're watching the broadcast, and you can have that visual feedback of seeing how a guy is playing and deciding whether you want to place a wager on it. Now, beyond that, the odds being integrated right into the broadcast, that I think exposes not only golf fans but golf bettors to a whole level of information they might not have known was there in the first place, right? There are a lot of golf analytic stats that only folks who follow the sport very closely tend to be versed in. And I mean, I'll be very honest, there's some that I know well and there's some that I really don't. Right. I mean, I'm looking forward to being exposed to new things by watching this broadcast. So you come to a sport where I think everyone who has played this game at some level has gone out, and when they've gone out in a foursome with their friends, had some level of a bet on playing golf together, right? So I don't think it's all that shocking for folks to see betting on golf integrated into TV the way that it would with baseball or hockey or other sports. It's going to be a really fascinating thing to watch.
And Dustin, one of the things about golf is we know it's kind of seeing a little bit of a renaissance right now. It used to be one of these deals where you were like the average golf fan was in his late 50s, early 60s. The kids were not into golf anymore. And what we started to see is that age has started to tick down a little bit. The viewership numbers have started to tick up a little bit for those younger viewers. And if anything, I think bringing something like this makes golf seem even kind of cooler, if you will. I mean, a lot of this has to do with the fact that there's a ton of young stars on tour right now. And I think a lot of kids look to these guys and are like, that guy's only 23 and he's doing this, only 22. And I think there's a lot of that's happening. But I think this can add a coolness factor to golf as well, which can also help the sport overall, can also help it from a betting standpoint, because obviously the more interest in a sport, the more money that's going to be flowing into a betting market. The one thing that one of my biggest complaints about golf always was the fact that they didn't talk about the money enough. Like, there are putts that come down to like on a hole 18 that's worth a couple $100,000 sometimes, and they don't ever say, wow, if he makes his putt, he's going to make $600,000. If he doesn't, he's going to make $400,000. I think that makes that putt a lot more interesting to the viewer at home, and that's something that the analysts never ever talk about. And at least now, as long as they don't shove it down our throats, as long as it's not every single shot, he's like, oh, he's going to be plus 108 if he puts this within 10 feet or so, as long as there's like not that on every, as long as it's not just like over the top, I think this is just really, really massive for the game, because I think, as Adam mentioned, just getting the exposure out there that people didn't even know, oh, I can bet this even as the tournament's going on. I can bet this is a type of bet that I can make in a golf market and stuff like that, I think is pretty, pretty huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you where if it's obnoxious, then you lose the cool factor. But I don't think it's going to be that bad. But yeah, I got to give kudos to the PGA Tour for kind of breaking the ice on this. This is the first time you're going to really see it in one of these major sports being given to viewers. And I'm with you. Like, golfer, we all know people gamble on golf. The golfers gamble between each other too, right? Yeah. Even in the pros, they have side bets when they're probably playing a tournament.
Hell, Shadow Creek is probably had more money change hands on that course than any course in the country. I mean, like, that is like the type of money games that get played out there. So yeah, I mean, it's a game built around gambling.
But yeah, so I'm excited to see how it is. I mean, we'll see how quickly other leagues follow, but PGA Tour has been kind of on the same path as Major League Baseball and the NBA. So I don't know how quickly we'll see this, but I think we're going to start seeing more integration as the PGA Tour kind of breaks the glass ceiling on this.
And Adam, to kind of put a bow on this, but I think one of the things that you mentioned is really the factor here in all this is everybody knows you can bet on golf. You can bet on all the sports. Everybody realizes you can bet on golf. I don't know if a lot of people realize that there are bets that you can make outside of just who's going to win the tournament, because there are a lot of people who I know who are bettors who didn't know stuff about, head-to-heads and groupings and, whatever the various in-game bets that they're going to be talking about that BetMGM is going to be offering for this tournament. And I think from a standpoint for not only for golf, but for BetMGM as well, having this type of showcase to be like, no. You don't have to just place the one bet and then wait 4 days to see if you're going to win your bet or not. You can place that bet, but then you can also continue to place this bet and this bet and this bet and this bet and this bet over the course of the next 4 days. And you can have all kinds of action, and you can literally be sweating every hole if you want to do that. Just exposing people to the vast menu that is actually available I think is a really, really huge moment for, again, not only golf, but for BetMGM as well.
And if you take that and take the picture out even a little bit wider and say, what is the future of the U.S. sports betting industry? It's bringing in those casual players, right? It's whether sports betting Twitter likes it or not, it is about expanding the universe. And when you make a sport like golf that can be very intimidating to try to bet more accessible, then you bring people in terms of engagement, and you bring them in with in-play betting and these alternate markets in terms of segmented and fragmented engagement, right? The problem with golf is more that it's hard to get someone to sit down and watch an entire round or, God forbid, an entire tournament. So to get them in a way where they're going to watch less and have a bet they can understand more that isn't necessarily who's going to win, because you feel like you're throwing a dart a lot of the time. Let's just bring up another market you didn't mention, but that I know you and I have talked about plenty, top 10s and top 20s, right? If I feel like a guy is a good player and I just want to say, well, I think he's going to play well this week, I don't know if he's going to win, but I think he's going to play well, then you can play those other alternate markets as well that give you a chance to win, even if your guy is not the champion.
And those are dynamic markets as well. And that's the other thing that I think, the casual bettor probably doesn't know, that those update after round 1, and you can bet that for round 2 and round 3, who's going to win, who's going to be a top 10, who's going to be a top 20. Like, these are all dynamic markets that are changing along the way. And I think that's the type of stuff that they'll probably highlight in this broadcast. And when we get done here, I can't wait to check out what's going on with all of that. And, we'll give our fair critique of it whenever we come back on the pod next week. Guys, as always, everything that we talk about here on the pod, you can find over at LegalSportsReport.com. You should definitely go in, subscribe, rate, and review to the podcast if you haven't already. It really helps us climb those charts, and also it'll just be at wherever you like to listen to podcasts. As soon as we post it, it'll pop right into your thing for you. So that's definitely the way we want to go. You should follow Dustin Gouker on Twitter at Dustin Gouker. You should follow Adam Candee at Adam Candee, 2 E's, no Y. You should never follow me, but if you want to, at Matt Brown M2. For Dustin, for Adam, I'm Matt. Talk to you guys next week.